The hard right party, the Alternative for Germany, has done very well, and also the hard left under Sarah Wagenknecht. What is your explanation for the rise of these two parties?
When I speak to my mayors in my constituency, they are far away from these two extreme parties, but still they say migration issue must be addressed better. We have a clear decision in my party. We don't cooperate with the AfD. It will be much more easy for a common understanding if we have Kamala Harris. And I think it's in our respective interests to do a better cooperation.
Okay, hello again. My name is Justin Stairs, and this is the Brussels Signal Studio. We have a guest in today. His name is Peter Liese. Thank you again for coming into the studio, Mr. Liese. He is one of the European Parliament's longest-serving members. Now, in fact, we had a quick discussion, and there is no one who has served longer than you, though there are some others who have served as long as you, right?
That's true.
Okay,
yes.
Since 1994. A member of the CDU party in Germany since 1987. That's the Christian Democratic Union Party, which is in opposition for the moment, says Mr. Liese, in Germany on a federal level. And the CDU is part of the European People's Party in the European Parliament, which is a centre-right party. Is that fair to describe it as? A centre-right party, okay. And by trade, you're a doctor, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
You started out in a children's ward?
Yes.
Right, okay. And what made you make the switch from doctor to parliamentarian?
I was always interested in the human being. So already in school, my main subject were history and biology, and the human biology interested me a lot. And in parallel to my studying of medicine and working as a ward doctor, I was active in local politics and also in the youth branch of CDU already at international level. So it was always both medicine and politics that inspired me. And I got the opportunity to merge the two issues also in the European Parliament, because I am an MEP, a politician, but I work a lot in the health policy. So during COVID, for example, it became obvious that European politics needs to take care about health.
We'll come back to that, but the first question I wanted to ask you, obviously we've just had the elections in East Germany, where the hard right party, the Alternative for Germany, has done very well, and also the hard left under Sarah Wagenknecht has also done well. What is your explanation for the rise of these two parties?
It is a big concern. Of course, the AfD, they are very far right. Even Le Pen in France doesn't want to cooperate with them because they are so far right. So this is really a shame for Germany that this party is number one in Thüringen and number two, almost number one in Saxonia. But also this Sarah Wagenknecht party is a big challenge. They are in a way far left on economic issues, but on migration, they are also quite on the right side of the political spectrum. So this is challenging for us. But it's also important to understand that in the European election, we had a quite different outcome. Unfortunately, in the east part of Germany, these two parties are very strong. But at the national level, overall, we succeeded. CDU is clearly number one, and the pro-European parties still have a strong majority. So that means we shouldn't exaggerate, and of course we shouldn't copy-paste their agenda, and we should continue to tell people how dangerous these parties are. And that was quite successful in the western part, but We need to do better in the eastern part. And we need to address the real concerns of citizens, not because these extreme parties pointed out, but because it's a serious issue also for people in the center. You know, when I speak to my mayors in my constituency, they are far away from these two extreme parties, but still they say migration issue must be addressed better. And the same is about bureaucracy. So we need to do better because there is a problem on substance, and then people will understand that we take care about the real concerns, and I'm optimistic that these extreme parties will go down again.
So take care of the concerns. Right, now you mentioned migration. Does that mean a stronger migration policy, letting in fewer people? What does that mean, take care of migration?
Yeah, we have much too late agreed on a migration pact in Europe. It has been suggested by Ursula von der Leyen and her Commission already in 2020. Greens and socialists in the European Parliament and in some member states, including Germany, delayed the agreement. That's why we don't have the solution yet. There is an agreement, but it has to be implemented. Would have been a solution, an agreement in 21. We had it already implemented. So what we now have to do with new majorities in the European Parliament, the left can't block decisions anymore. So we need to go for faster implementation of the migration pact, and maybe also to have some adjustment so that people really understand we take care about those that are really asylum seekers, that have a political reason or religious reason why they come to Europe. But we have to overcome the impression that everybody who feels that Europe is a better place can really come to Europe. This is too burdensome for our municipalities.
You're talking about the difference between asylum seekers and economic migrants, essentially?
That's definitely the point. You know, we have a lot of people that have personally good reasons to try to come to Europe, but no right, and that has to be managed much better.
Okay, and as far as East Germany is concerned, what do you think the solution should be? Should the AfD be allowed, for example, into some kind of power sharing agreement at a state level? Or are you one of these people who say, whatever, we have to keep the AfD out, even if they are the largest party? What's your view?
We have a clear decision in my party. We don't cooperate with the AfD. And that's why we need to stick to that. You know, the worst thing you can do is to do different after the election than you promised to do before. And I think, in fact, if they are in government, that would be dangerous for Germany, and it would also be dangerous for Europe. And there is a majority without them, so this majority should be materializing.
And does that include the Sarah Wagenknecht party or not?
You know, Sarah Wagenknecht's party is a black box. So there are only very few members, and there's no party program. So that is a risk, of course, because you only have headlines and you don't know where they really go. But it's also an opportunity so that discussions with these people can lead to a more moderate position. So there is no formal decision not to talk to them, and it's up to the colleagues at the regional level.
Okay,
to
so
discuss.
that's a maybe,
Yeah.
depending on what happens. Okay, now, as you're one of the longest serving Euro MPs, I wanted to ask you how your job has changed over the last 30 years. You're celebrating 30 years in the Parliament this year. Is there a one sentence to describe how your job has changed?
Yeah, the most important change is, of course, that we have co-decision procedure in almost every political area. When I started, the Treaty of Maastricht was just decided. The co-decision was introduced in a limited area of policies. And now we have the co-decision as the normal procedure.
Right. For those who don't know what co-decision is, it basically gives the European Parliament more power over all legislation. That's a simplified way.
We are on equal footing with the Council of Ministers, so the representation of the member states, of the governments. So it's like in the US, if you do together with Senate and the House. They are on equal footing, and that's how we as a parliament are on equal footing with the representation of the member states in the Council of Ministers, which means no decision can be taken without the European Parliament. That gives people a lot of influence in what is happening in the European politics.
Right, so basically the big change over the last 30 years has been that the European Parliament has got more power. Is
Definitely,
that fair? Is that
yes,
fair?
Definitely, yes.
And what about the profile of Euro MPs over that period? I mean, has that changed, or do people take MEPs more seriously today than they did, or has it always?
Definitely. When I arrived, I was very young, 29, and this was considered to be a big surprise because in the years before 94, only old politicians that were in the end of their career were sent to the European Parliament to do some extra round. And there was a saying in Germany, hast du einen Opa, schick ihn nach Europa. So do you have a grandpa, send him to Europe. And then it changed. I was not the only young, and there are many colleagues that started even earlier than at the age of 29. And many of them became very prominent in national politics afterwards. So to mention some of those, Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, is a former colleague, Friedrich Merz, the leader of my party and former maybe future chancellor. He was my predecessor. So young people that started in the European Parliament now are in the first row in national politics. And that was the other way around before.
I see. Okay. And what is your opinion of the future of the EU? I mean, there's a lot of talk about more power concentrated in Brussels, federalism, for example, more power to the European Commission, the end of the veto, for example, among member states. What do you think should happen, and what do you think will happen?
Yeah, we should concentrate on big issues. So we did, in some areas, we did too much micromanagement. So many,
for example,
many detailed regulations. So there were ideas, for example, to ban small packages of sugar to avoid waste. While I think, we should, of course, give the direction that waste, and especially plastic waste, should be reduced, but not going too detailed. But we should be much stronger on big things, and the most important thing is security, foreign policy. Here, the veto blocks us, and I'm not sure what will happen. We have, unfortunately, too many member states, too many voices in member states that think member states can do alone. And this far right are the most prominent example. And I see a big risk that if we are not united on these big issues, Europe may be weakened. So we will see United States that ask us to take more responsibility. The partnership between European Union and the United States is challenged. I'm a strong proponent of good transatlantic relationships, but in particular, depending on the outcome of the US election, we need to be stronger also independently from the United States and take more responsibility. And we have China as a big threat for the Western world in a whole, and Russia. So if we are not united, historians in 20, 30 years may say there was a big opportunity for Europe to be on equal footing with the United States and China, but national interest in Europe destroyed this opportunity. And I'm fighting for history to say we managed.
Okay, and one of these big issues, I presume, is the Ukraine war. Is that fair to say? What is your stance?
Definitely. And that is one of the biggest concerns after these elections in Eastern Germany. The AfD, as well as the party of Sarah Wagenknecht, they are against the Western support of Ukraine. They talk about peace without understanding that the key to peace is to show Putin that he won't be successful. Now, when we just give up Ukraine, I'm quite afraid that other countries like Moldavia, Georgia, the Baltic states will be the next victim. And this is a scenario that I'm really afraid of. So we need to stand together. And the good thing is that a majority of Germans and a majority of Europeans, a strong majority in the European Parliament, still supports Ukraine. And I hope we will have peace, but a peace that is based on the international law and not on the violation of international law.
Okay, I know that you've have lots of experience in specific policy areas, so I want to talk to you about some of them, and maybe we could start with the Green Deal. In Brussels, this is a big deal. The Green Deal is a big deal in that it's bringing in lots of changes. You, according to the research that I've done, are a proponent of, now how to put it, the Green Deal being less restrictive or some kind of changes to the Green Deal, maybe the Green Deal being watered down. What is your precise position, and please explain what changes you would like?
I want to make the Green Deal a success. So I want us to achieve our climate targets, 55% until 2030 and climate neutrality until 2050. But I'm convinced that we will be only successful if we rely less on regulation, on prohibition, command and control. I'm a strong proponent of the emission trading, which means market-based system keeps the freedom for everybody to do whatever he likes, but give a market signal that those that save CO2 are better off. They will make money out of this scheme, and others will have to pay when they don't change. So that's what I think is the best way. We have been too prescriptive, and sometimes the left majority that was in the Committee for Environment until the election, they did adopt positions that were contradicting each other's. So you ban a specific type of chemical that you need for the energy transition. So this makes no sense. We need modern technologies, hydrogen, wind, to do the transition. And my idea is to merge the agenda of less bureaucracy and the agenda of climate transition. So the CEO of a big steel plant in Germany told me they need more than 50 permits to decarbonize the steel plant. And, to have an easier permitting and to maybe merge it to one process where also the timelines are short and you can just go for the transition, that will help. So we want to keep the jobs and we want to keep the freedom of people. And I think only if we do the transition this way, with less prohibition, with more opportunities for the business, we will be a good example for the rest of the world.
Right, but does that mean that the legislation needs to be rewritten?
Yeah, I think some of the legislation needs to be rewritten. We have a ban of the combustion engine, which is
by 2035.
2035,
right.
Which is, I think, not helpful because there are technologies like e-fuels that could make the combustion engine climate neutral. And it's not for politicians to decide which technology should be used. It's for the engineers and for the market. And but more important is, in my view, that we ease the bureaucratic burden for people that want to go for the transition. So we need a kind of package, less bureaucracy for the climate.
Okay, now just that would mean, would it not, that the European Commission would have to propose new legislation that amends the old legislation? Is that the way it could work or would
Definitely.
work?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
We are in intensive talks with Ursula von der Leyen personally and her team how to do this. And she already announced something in her speech before her election. And there will be very concrete proposal during the next weeks, I guess.
Okay, because I wanted to ask specifically on that point. Obviously, the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, was reappointed with the support of the Greens. I'm wondering, she's got the support of the Greens, and at the same time, you're expecting her to propose legislation which will water down somewhat the Green Deal. Is that going to happen?
At least some key players in the Green group are realistic. They understand that we cannot continue like we did the last 5 years, and their main concern was that the Green Deal will not be completely reverted. And that's, of course, also not in my interest. There were some voices in the parliament, including in my group, that want to revert the Green Deal. This is not a majority position and definitely not my position. So we can come together with the Greens, but I admit there's some work to be done also.
Okay.
Some of the Greens are still dreaming about even more burdensome, very strict legislation, and that, of course, we cannot support.
Okay. Different subject. As a doctor, or former doctor by training, you have expressed concern about medicine shortages in the EU. Where are we today, and how have these shortages come to be?
Yeah, these shortages have not been caused by the European Union, but Europe can be of help to solve them. The shortages has been generated because member states, when they did the tender, the national health systems, in some countries insurance system, in others state health service, when they looked at, in particular for the generics, so the cheap products that come when the patent is expired, intellectual property is expired, they have looked at every cent how to save money. And nobody looked at the security of supply. So that's why most of these products are produced in India and China. And when there is a lockdown in China or there's a problem in the Suez Channel, and we have a problem with medicine in Europe. So what we need to do is to encourage companies to produce in Europe or like-minded countries where we have a quite stable supply chain, and that needs to be rewarded. It will cost a little bit more money, but it will save a lot of pain, and it will save lives, and it will also save money. Now, I worked as a doctor, and last year there was an emergency call from the hospital. Everybody should help because we are overloaded, and I did help. And there were some children in the hospital only because we didn't have the antibiotic for oral application. So they needed to stay in hospital for infusion just because we don't have the oral medication.
Pills, you mean? Pills?
Yeah, or syrup.
Right.
We had no syrup, and that's why the children needed to be in the hospital. So how expensive is 1 day in a hospital, and how cheap is one more cent or 10 cents more for a doses of antibiotic?
Now, so this is what they call reshoring or nearshoring, isn't it? Now, I mean, you said that these companies should be encouraged. How would that work?
Yeah, the main point will be that we have different tenders, and the European Commission is working on guidelines so that when you do a tender, you do not only look at the price, but you also look at the quality of the supply chain, and that production in Europe, in my view also in the UK or United States, if we have stable agreement on the supply, so UK behavior on the AstraZeneca vaccine during COVID was not a good example, but normally we should have a relationship with UK and United States that the supply chain is more sure than with China or India. And then this should be rewarded so that companies that produce in Europe or like-minded countries get a bonus.
Okay, so rewriting the tender rules, basically.
Yes, that's the main thing. And then it's like in the Green Deal, less bureaucracy when you want to produce something in Europe. should also be helpful.
Okay, on that subject, less bureaucracy, this is one of the key issues in the deforestation legislation, which you've also been working on. Now, you explain it, but as I understand it, according to the legislation, if you're importing into Europe, you'll have to prove that certain foodstuffs have not caused deforestation. Is that right? And what changes do you want to see?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to keep the essence of this regulation, like the essence of the Green Deal. We watch deforestation in a dramatic scale, so 10 hectare every minute. So that is really a big problem, and all countries in the world should be interested in stopping this because it threatens our global climate and our biodiversity. But the way how the majority in the European Parliament wants to do it, the old majority before the election, is very bureaucratic. I was working in Guatemala as a doctor. I worked with coffee farmers, and I know that some of them don't even speak Spanish. So for them to apply the tool of the European Union to prove that they didn't cut forest is almost impossible. We need to make it easier, and I think the problem are not the small coffee farmers. The problem are the big players that cut trees, and we need to do it in better cooperation. When even the Biden administration sends a letter to the European Commission that the way how we do it is provoking third countries and not helping the purpose, we need to think twice. I think we need to postpone the implementation and then get some rules that are more easy to apply, in particular for small farmers and small forest owners. Exemptions for the small ones, and at least an easier tool to do it, and focus on the big deforestation people.
Right. So you're in favor of a 2-year postponement, is that correct?
Yeah.
And would the legislation need to be rewritten?
I think so, yes. We need to see that the small farmers in Europe and outside Europe get some easier way out.
Is there a majority in the Parliament for this kind of revision?
We didn't test it, but I'm sure that we will make it. Okay. We need to discuss the details, of course, but I see more and more people supporting a change.
Okay, you mentioned, I'm curious, you mentioned the US a couple of times there. What is your view on the US elections and how the results, given who might win, would affect the European Union?
Yeah, so first of all, Europe needs to take more responsibility, for example, on defense, independent who is winning. So that's not an issue where we can hope to escape our responsibility when Trump is not the next president. But, it will be much more easy for a common understanding if we have Kamala Harris. And I think it's in our respective interests to do a better cooperation. I mentioned this safety of medicine, the safety of supply. If we have an agreement with the United States, they can benefit, US companies can benefit from the bonus. Of course, if we have Trump, that is not a reliable partner, we cannot give US companies a bonus. So it's in the mutual interest to have a better understanding, to have a better cooperation. And I'm very interested in the climate agenda. We know that we can only deal with it globally, and to have an ally. John Kerry was a great guy, and he was very helpful in the outcome of the agreement in Dubai. I hope we have Democrats in power.
Okay, that's great. That's almost 30 minutes. So thank you very much, Mr. Liese, for coming into the studio.